Time now for Back Pages Tonight here on Sky Sports News, bringing you a first look at the sports stories in the morning's newspapers. And joining us are Mark Ogden, senior writer at ESPN, and Jack Rosser, football reporter with The Sun. Welcome to you both. Let's run through the back pages, dominated by one story: the sad loss of the great Denis Law at the age of 84. The Mail says farewell to the King. Same image of his famous goal-scoring salute leads the coverage of the Telegraph too. They also cover Erling Haaland's 9.5-year contract at Manchester City. Different image, but the same fond farewell dominates the back page of The Sun, and they too have detail on the Haaland deal that's described as crazy by Haaland himself. And the Mirror has a different image still, capturing Law in his element at Old Trafford. It's like a left-foot finish. OK, let's start with the Mail. Come to you, Mark. A poignant piece by Ian Ladyman, football editor there. He still came to Old Trafford whenever he could in his later years with the collars on his raincoat pulled up to his ears, almost as though he did not want anybody to know it was him. But we did know it was him, Mark. The word legend is used, but do we need a new word for someone of the stature of Denis Law?
Well, I suppose it's icon, isn't it? Icon's probably one level above a legend, and he's certainly an icon at Manchester United and an icon of the British game. You know, the only Ballon d'Or winner from Scotland, one of three at the United team at the time, best Lord Charlton. You know, every generation has their heroes and their legends and their icons, but some, the absolute greats, they go beyond that generation. So, you know, you're talking about best Lord Charlton, Kenny Dalglish, Bobby Moore. These are the players that no matter what generation you watch the game, you know these names. And, you know, the younger people that will be going to Old Trafford on Sunday for the game against Leicester, and I'm sure there'll be some sort of, you know, huge tribute. They'll know who Denis Law was. They'll know all about him. They'll see his statue every time they go to the game. And the fact that his last game at Old Trafford was over 50 years ago, and it was a very memorable one for probably the wrong reasons, because he scored the goal which confirmed United's relegation while playing for Man City. But Denis Law is a name that every football fan has heard about. You know, he's heard about Bobby Charlton and Denis Law and George Best, and that's the level that Denis Law is at. He is an iconic name, an iconic figure. The pictures are showing there that, again, that just sums him up. You know, you could blank out his face and you know exactly who it is. The celebration, the finger in the cuff. It was just, Denis Law is just one of those names that transcends any generation, any team. You know, the tributes that have been published tonight from Liverpool, from Everton, from Glasgow Rangers, from Aberdeen, from Scotland, from clubs across the country, because Denis Law is such a great figure of British football, and United will miss him. He's the last of their great generation from the 1960s, and I'm sure you'll know about it on Sunday when they have a memorable tribute at the game against Leicester.
This is your paper, Jack. Farewell King. Law pictured again, this time in the shooting action before the famous celebration. And even though, Jack, it's so long ago, there's not even a club badge, I don't think, on that shirt. There's no sponsors. There's probably no name on the back, I'm sure. This man's emblazoned in all young football fans' memories as well. Truly, I suppose, one of the most iconic from these shores in what, 100 years?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm young enough, I can't even remember him as a pundit, let alone a player, but still everyone of my generation will know exactly who he is, will recognise his image in the statue in those pictures. And he's someone as well that obviously when famous players, famous people around the world pass away, you get a lot of tributes from everyone, but huge praise even before he passed away, before his diagnosis. I think Alex Ferguson identified him as his idol growing up, and when he was asked, a lot of the Manchester United figures were asked to name an icon of the club, he went with Denis Law, and Matt Busby named him as one of that generation's greatest players. He's someone that, of course, I never saw play, but when you read about, almost has everything you want in a player of that stature: a bit of grit, but plenty of flair and efficiency, and an incredible goals record as well. When you read the amount that he scored, I think only Bobby Charlton and Wayne Rooney have scored for Manchester United, and the way he did it as well with such grace. I think Ian, in that piece in the Mail, also says he was like smoke, a drop of the shoulder that everyone knew was coming, but few could deal with. And I think that's always the mark of an incredible player. Everyone knows exactly what's coming, but not too many people know what to do about it. And I think that's what marks a player down through the generations. And I think the fact that he's held in such high esteem in Scottish football when he came from a generation where there were so many great figures in Scottish football as well just shows how big of an impact he made on multiple generations of fans.
Scotland's only Ballon d'Or winner to date, Mark. Back page of the Express. Farewell to the King. Scotland and United legend was one of the game's greats. That's an earlier photograph, I believe, in the paper with a round neck jersey there. Couldn't put up the collar as he famously did later on. In the context of Manchester United, Mark, how foundational was his signing? Because it was a very difficult time for the club, wasn't it, when he came in the early 60s?
Well, that's right. I mean, he came when Matt Busby was rebuilding the side after Munich. And, you know, at that point, United were a team that was struggling. I was watching a clip earlier on of Denis Law speaking about his biggest highlight from his time at United. And he actually referenced the FA Cup final against Leicester in '63, which United won. But they just avoided relegation that season because United, it was only 5 years after Munich and Busby was rebuilding the side. But, you know, Denis Law had gone to Italy, to Torino, and for a record fee, and he'd come back to United for a big fee at a time when United were rebuilding. He almost put faith in United to fulfil his dreams as well as theirs. And I think that's why he was such a big figure at United for that generation of fans, because he obviously showed faith in Matt Busby and he delivered on so many levels. He was the superstar that couldn't stop scoring goals. So in terms of the foundation that he helped lay at United, it's massive. You know, obviously one of his biggest regrets was that he never played in the European Cup final in '68. He was injured at the time, and there are photographs of him celebrating with a glass of champagne from his hospital bed, which, you know, is such an iconic figure of the club. To miss out on one of probably their greatest moment, you know, 10 years after Munich, to become the first English team to win the European Cup. So, but that didn't dent his legendary status. He remained an absolutely huge figure at United, despite not playing the European Cup final. And I think, you know, you speak to anybody from that generation, and Denis Law is their hero. You know, Man United. I saw Kenny Dalglish talking earlier about how Denis Law was his idol. But that group of players, Best, Law, Charlton, they're all different. You know, George Best was this mercurial genius that scored these amazing goals. You know, El Beatle, Benfica, these games. Bobby Charlton was obviously, it was just different. Bobby Charlton was this great, you know, almost English gent that scored these wonderful goals. But Denis Law had the mischief, and he had the goals, and he had like the human touch, the personal touch. And I met him a couple of times, and obviously, you know, it was obviously covering much later than after he played, but he was a much more approachable figure, I guess, than Sir Bobby Charlton. Sir Bobby always was quite a distinguished figure. George Best was quite a shy figure, I won't say reclusive, but he was different. But Denis Law had the common touch that I think made him appeal to the fans, as well as his hero status that he had. He was also one of them, and, you know, he would get into scrapes and scraps on the pitch, and he was tough, and I think the fans identified with him. So he is Manchester United through and through. And I think you talk about the great players they've had, and, you know, the Premier League generation might look at Eric Cantona as their king, but Denis Law is the player that the generations predating the Premier League will say was the greatest player. It's hard. I don't think there's any greater player for Man United than Denis Law. There's people like Bobby Charlton, Best, that are on the same level, but there's no bigger star at Man United than Denis Law, and that's probably the greatest tribute that anyone can pay. That such a great club, and there's nobody bigger than him.
Yeah, indeed. Cantona stole his moniker, didn't he? And the upturned collar as well. Jack, back page of the Mirror. The king of Old Trafford, tributes to a Manchester United icon. That wonderful picture of Law with the left foot shot there at Old Trafford when he's training in his tracksuit top. And Jack, for younger people who perhaps haven't seen the footage, you can look it up now, thankfully, on the internet. How would you describe him? Was he the perfect striker? We've heard adjectives like electric, because in terms of right foot, left foot, and heading for a relatively modestly sized guy was phenomenal, wasn't he? He seemed just to cut above everyone else in that old footage.
It's the one thing that's quite high up in a lot of the tributes, isn't it? If you read a few of them, the fact that he was so capable and proficient in the air for someone that didn't have that sort of stature. When you look at the clips, you read the tributes from teammates or players and see clips of them talking about one another. I think that's why they made such a good triumvirate, that Holy Trinity, because, like Mark said, you've got George Best with the flamboyance, Bobby Charlton sort of gliding around and looking after everything, but Denis Law being able to do a bit of both, and that probably is what elevates him to that status that Mark was talking about, as no one being able to surpass him at Old Trafford, because he's got a finish on both feet, that his numbers are incredible. It's more than a goal every other game for Manchester United, and he scored goals wherever he went for Scotland as well. And it's that, I think, that stands the test of time, that ability to be a danger to any side you face, and to be someone that people need to keep tabs on in the box. It's what makes him this status of someone that, whoever you are at Manchester United, thanks to the fact that he's part of that famous statue outside, he's got another one at the ground somewhere, I think, as well. Everyone will know who he is, be introduced to him, and that's the standard that has been set at Manchester United for such a long time. Matt Busby rebuilding them to that level. That is the team and especially the three players that everyone will point to, and to be that sort of example at a club of Manchester United's size, history, and success level is an incredible tribute.
Indeed. When I close my eyes, Mark, and I think of him hanging in the air, seemingly defying gravity. But there is a sombre, I guess, sideline story connected to that as well. Jeremy Wilson writing about this in the Telegraph. Dementia struck Law, but he was dignified to end. One of sport's most popular players, was 7th of United's 1968 European Cup winners to go public with the condition. Mark, just a piece in here by Jeremy Wilson. Having suffered headaches after heading the ball during training, Law would ignore those players who might make fun of him for eventually avoiding headers in practice because he sensed that it was, quote, doing me no good. Again, it's a very sad ending, I suppose, and it's a reminder to football that we have to care for these players, past and present, because this is an ongoing issue.
Yeah, and it's becoming a common theme, isn't it? You know, the greats of yesteryear are dying, you know, more regularly now, and many of them are having issues with dementia, and they're tracing it back to when they were playing as footballers, you know, having to head the balls. And obviously, listen, technology's changed in the years since, and the footballs are now different. And, you know, the footballs they used to head in the 50s and the 60s were very heavy and, you know, laced up, especially when they were wet. So it's a much different game then. But these players that played in those days, they, you know, action is being taken against potential industrial injury, and I know the PFA and the FA are looking into it, and it's an ongoing process. It's been going on for quite a long time, and the families of the players are frustrated. The players are frustrated. You know, I saw David May speaking last week, the former United player, about Dean Windass, you know, who said he'd been diagnosed with dementia. And, you know, Dean's on his 50s, so it's obviously a great concern. But Denis Law's death will raise more attention to the issue. And it's a growing issue because, you know, if heading a football is dangerous and can lead to dementia, it's important that we know about it. And what can you do to stop it? I don't know. I know young players now are, you know, urged not to head the ball as much, so it's part of the game. But I think every lesson that can be learned is an important one. I think, you know, Denis Law's family have been quite bold and upfront in saying that, you know, Denis has got dementia and Alzheimer's, and it's an issue that needs to be looked at and addressed by the game.
Yep, Jeremy concludes his piece. Jack, players need to be clearly informed. They need to be protected, particularly in training, suggesting it could be a current issue. We just don't know. I suppose parents need to be informed of all this, Jack, as well.
Absolutely, and I think there's a line in that piece from Jeremy as well, from an inquiry last year, that speaks about the fact that even though the technology's moved on, the fact that modern balls move much faster than the older, heavier ones means that they could still be a danger to players heading. And I think it's now limited in terms of the amount of sessions teams can do in training at every level of the English game, but it's something that awareness needs to keep on going. And that was another fantastic thing about Denis Law. He was happy to announce his diagnosis and speak about it. And even though it's an incredibly sad thing for him to have to confront and talk about, and for his family to have to shoulder, he and they did it with such dignity and put such a lot of time and effort into continuing to raise that awareness. It's something that the Alzheimer's Society have paid tribute to him for tonight. So it's a horrible thing for families to have to go through, but for someone like Denis Law to shine even more of a light on it and keep the focus on this issue in football as well is a fantastic thing for him to have done.
Let's hope he has a positive legacy on that front, as well as he undoubtedly has in the football world. Jack and Mark, thank you very much for now. And everyone here at Sky Sports sends our condolences to the family and friends of Denis Law. When Back Pages Tonight returns, we'll look at some of the day's other headlines. Erling Haaland has just signed the longest contract in Premier League history, but what motivated him to make such a commitment? That story is up next. Welcome back. You're watching Back Pages Tonight, and it's welcome back to our guests, Mark Ogden, senior writer at ESPN, Jack Rosser, football reporter with The Sun. Let's talk Erling Haaland. Front page of the Telegraph Sports Supplement carries it on the bottom half of their page. Haaland's 9.5-year City deal. Jack, did you see this coming? How extraordinary was this when you saw it rattle across your emails this morning?
Yeah, the length of the contract is a very big surprise. I think, you know, everyone would want to tie a player like that down to a long deal, but I do have to give tip of the hat to my colleague Martin Blackburn, who reported in, I think it was back at the end of November, that this was something that Manchester City wanted to do after getting Pep Guardiola tied down to a contract. They were going to do as much as they could to secure Erling Haaland's future. And I think the surprising thing about it really is that Erling Haaland has obviously made an incredible impact at Manchester City, but even since he was there early on, there was sort of a feeling that he'd come in, do everything he could for the club, but maybe he wanted to go to Real Madrid not too far in the distant future, come in and have a great impact in the Premier League and go and see what he could do at a club like Real Madrid. The fact that he's then been able to commit, the vast majority of his career to Manchester City shows either that they've thrown absolutely everything at him and that's the motivation behind it, or he's really found a home in Manchester and is enjoying his football in the Premier League, even though they might be struggling this season. He's already achieved fantastic things at that club. I think that Guardiola signing a new deal will also be a big part of the fact that he wants to continue on. But yeah, the size of it and the fact that it seemingly came out of nowhere a touch, especially it's not been something there's been talks of this week. It was rather remarkable news.
Indeed, yeah, he has family connections to the club as well, doesn't he, Mark? But the money is kind of eye-watering. I suppose if you can get it, why not? But Oliver Brown with a typically punchy piece in the Telegraph here. Footballers used to be one of us, but not anymore. Erling Haaland's ludicrous salary, which could reach £1 million every week, shows how game has lost its link with fans. Billy Liddell catching the 26 tram to Anfield, writes Oliver Brown, as an example of the past with Liverpool fans. Tom Finney completing a plumber's apprenticeship, and Jimmy Armfield starting his match day with steaks the butcher's boy had brought. It does seem jarring, doesn't it, Mark, after what we're talking about with Denis Law, a former Manchester City and United player who went on to be in a carpet business. It's not Haaland's fault, but do you think the game is getting a bit far away from the average fan?
Well, listen, the game has changed, and yes, the salaries are, unthinkable to any average fan. I mean, the money that an average Premier League player earns is life-changing for anybody. So, you can't begrudge Erling Haaland. He's the best at what he does in the world. So that's why he can command such a huge contract and a huge salary. And, in fairness to Erling Haaland, he's not a person that hides away. He is somebody that you will see now and again walking through Manchester with his partner. So he's not aloof and distant. He is a normal guy, and I think he plays up to that a little bit. So, like you say, it's not his fault that Man City want to pay him all this money. And I think, we'll only find out if or when Erling Haaland leaves, how long this contract will last in terms of how long it will keep him at Man City. It's an incredibly long contract. It's unprecedented, I think, in the game. And I think, obviously, at the time right now, with City still waiting to hear the outcome of the hearing into the 100-plus charges for the Premier League, which City deny, what they're doing with Erling Haaland suggests that they want to get everything tied up before the verdict comes out, because you can look at it two ways. It's either City are very confident they're going to win and they're going to get all the business done now, or the flip side is that they want to project an air of confidence and everything being done as normal, just in case it goes against them. And if it does go against them, then that's when the question marks will grow over the length of Haaland's contract. And if there is an escape clause, we don't know. We'll probably never find out. But if City are hit hard by the panel, which decides the Premier League hearing, to the point where it costs them a place in the Champions League next season, or perhaps even worse, demotion or a points deduction which leads to relegation, then will Erling Haaland see that through? So lots of questions that have been raised by this contract, but right now, as it stands, it's an incredible deal for him and for Man City, and they've got the best striker in the world for the next 9.5 years. It
was still waiting for that decision, of course, from the hearing. Manchester City, as we say, always deny any wrongdoing, Jack. But I just wonder, as we look at that Star back page headline, long haul flights, a striker will earn 500k a week. Is this about committing his long-term 10-year future to Manchester City, or is this just protecting an investment if the big boys of Europe come knocking?
There's definitely an element of that to it either way, in terms, as Mark said, nobody really knows what's going to happen over the next couple of months with the decision over Manchester City's charges, and they're either going to be, they're confident and they're going to get off relatively lightly. You can't really decide what relatively likely would be, but if they're in the Premier League next season, then they have got the world's best striker secured and safe and seemingly very happy on their books, and something that they don't have to worry about for the next couple of years. There's going to be an awful lot of change at Manchester City. You think we've spoken all season about how much work needs to be done on their squad in terms of a regeneration, but Erling Haaland certainly isn't one of those. And then if, for they do get a rough deal from the Premier League and they're found guilty on a number of charges, then they're going to need protection in terms of getting the most they can for some of these players. Erling Haaland isn't going to want to exist at the bottom of the Premier League or even further below that. A player of his quality deserves to be on the biggest stages, and they're going to need to get the money for that. So a contract of this length means that the clubs that want to sign him, regardless of Manchester City's situation, are still going to have to pay an awful lot of money.
Yep, City moving to secure their future. Then across the city, Manchester United already in the bottom half of the table, or might be by the end of Saturday's play, Mark, but they've got plans of their own future here, writes James Ducker, Northern football correspondent. United ready to fast-track plan for building of £2 billion stadium. This in the Telegraph. Ambitious project has edge on redeveloping Old Trafford. Mark, what's your understanding of the story?
Yeah, I mean, James's piece, reading between the lines, it's fairly clear that Ineos and United want to build a new stadium, and I think that the reasons are given that a regeneration of Old Trafford as it stands is only going to take the capacity up to the late 80,000, which would be the biggest stadium in England, the club stadium, but not enough for United to actually capitalise on their support. That a new stadium would be over 100,000, it would bring in naming rights opportunities and lots and lots of earning potential. So I think that's where they're heading, but obviously somebody's got to pay for it. United can't pay for it because they haven't got the money to pay for it. So that is the question mark that will hang over this, because I don't think they can expect the public to pay for a Premier League stadium. So quite a long way to go, but they want a big new stadium. That's the way it's heading.
Absolutely. We'll keep across that United's plans for the stadium as well, possibly a PR redemption mission for the Sir Jim Ratcliffe and company at the moment. Let's talk about Arsenal quickly. North London, Jack, Jamie Carragher writing, Arteta's Arsenal reign may have reached peak already. What do you think? Is there a lack of conviction, or are they banging this title race?
I think it's too much to say they're banging it at the moment. There's definitely a chance for them to go and get into it, but I think if that's going to be the case, they need to find another dimension again. They've definitely regressed a touch this season. They've had poor luck with injuries. They lost Odegaard for a chunk, obviously Saka, and then just as he was getting into form, Gabriel Jesus. But they feel like they need to find another gear again. They're still an incredibly solid team that, while there's been so much praise for their set pieces, that feels almost about the only thing we've been looking at the last few weeks. There's not quite been the electric attacking play that we can expect from them. The sort of understudies are very good and capable players, but can't replace the quality of Odegaard and Saka. We saw it when Odegaard came back, that they suddenly went up to another level, and they've dropped back down again when Saka picked up his injury. So I think Jamie makes the point in there as well that they might need to go out and get a striker. And it does feel like if they are going to really worry Liverpool for the rest of this season, that is something they need to go and do. I think Mikel Arteta's admitted that this has caused some problems for their long-term transfer plans. Yeah, but it's something they're going to go and have to do if they want to get properly in the title race. Yeah,
big game, Arsenal against Aston Villa. Also, Matt Law writing in the Telegraph, Spurs not pulling trigger on Postecoglou yet. Tottenham up against Everton in a huge match on Sunday. Mark, Jack, thank you for your time on Back Pages tonight. Enjoy the football over the weekend and speak to you again soon. Well, if you missed any of the show, another chance to see Back Pages tonight, 1:30. Also available as a podcast. Back Pages on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Up next, the tributes continue to a legend, the king of the Stretford End. Denis Law has passed, aged 84.